welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lee Van Crumbort. I'm part of the enterprise developer team here at BlackBerry. Today, this webcast is what BlackBerry and Good means to developers, Good Dynamics App SDK Introduction Part 1. So this is part of a three-part webcast series to introduce everyone to the world of Good Dynamics and the SDK for developers. So with that today, we have Ed and Rich, and they're going to be talking a little bit about the BlackBerry roadmap and good product integration as it relates to developers. And then we've got Rich and EK that are going to be talking a little bit further in depth about the Good Dynamics SDK and what it specifically means to developers. So with that, I'll hand things off to Ed Bourne. Ed, you're away.
Thank you, Lee. So I'm going to start off actually by handing this off to my colleague Richard. I'm going to have Richard give a little bit of an intro on what it is that Good Dynamics is bringing to BlackBerry. Richard. Richard, we got you?
Yep, sorry there. Good Dynamics is a secure platform for building mobile applications. And I'm just going to cover some of the high points right now, and then we'll dive deeper in. So it allows the IT admin to prevent leakage of corporate data outside of applications on a policy-controlled basis. It utilizes security levels that include MDM, mobile device management, MAM, mobile application management, and secure containers. It secures enterprise data while it's in use, also while it's at rest or stored within the application, and in motion or in communication between the app and back-end servers. And it can maintain the security of documents and data shared between apps on the phone themselves in an encrypted way through a proprietary app-to-app tunneling technology. So that's the overview, and I'll let Ed step into the next slide.
Thanks, Rich. So for those of you who are BlackBerry customers or Good customers, now that the companies have joined, how do they compare? Well, in fact, both Good and Bez have had a very similar or very comparable business model in terms of how they deliver content from the back end to the front end. And for developers, you both, depending on which side of the fence you've come into this conversation, the design is very similar. In fact, it's unique compared to all of our competitors. Almost all of our competitors have very complicated or very sophisticated, if you want to be generous, ways of mapping data from devices into the back end and doing all those things that Rich just suggested: data at rest, data at motion, data in use. The top picture that I've got here is a very classic BlackBerry view of things, where you've got devices on the left-hand side, you've got BlackBerry infrastructure, a firewall connecting to a BlackBerry enterprise server, where from there you get access to your different back-end systems. The Good model is almost identical in terms of its presentation. Again, you've got devices on the left-hand side, you've got wireless infrastructure, you've got the Good Network Operations Center, similar to the BlackBerry one. Again, a firewall. In fact, the biggest difference, which I isn't actually labeled on this slide, is how the Bez communicates to the devices, or how the Good server connects to the Good devices. And BlackBerry has always used port 3101. Bez Good uses port 443. That's probably the biggest physical difference in terms of the two. But the infrastructure model here is very similar. If you look at any other diagram from any of our competitors, this is a much more complex diagram involving DMZs and proxies and other things that make a much more interesting way of setting things up. Okay, so the two companies are now one. What does that mean in terms of platform integration? So we haven't been explicit about timelines as of yet, but this is the basic path that you'll see us take as we go through the following year and a bit as we start to migrate and manage the infrastructure for both platforms. So the first step is taking BlackBerry apps and technologies and integrating them with the Good SDK. So we've already started that process with some of the BlackBerry services that we have today. For example, Watchdogs and Ad Hoc and so on. Those applications have been have been embedded with the Good Dynamics SDK and deployed so that they will show up inside the Good container. The next step that's happened is unified end-user enrollment. That's also happened as of last week. On Friday, we launched the latest update to BES 12.4. BES 12.4 now includes a unified user enrollment experience. So for those of you who are enrolling a device for Android, iOS, or what have you, and you want to enroll that through BES 12, you can now do so in a unified way for both Good Dynamics and for BES 12. As things move through, as the year rolls along, while the users will have a unified enrollment experience today as of BES 12, we'll also add a unified IT experience. So for those of you who are familiar with the Good controller interface for managing devices, or the BES 12 interface for managing devices, we'll have a unified IT admin screen that will allow similar access to both systems in order to administer them. Next step after that is a unified BES and Good server footprint. So we've got the Good control server, the Good proxy, the BES 12, and so on. We'll begin to collapse those down into what's needed to manage devices using the Good SDK. And finally, the nirvana at the end here is we'll have a unified network connectivity infrastructure, meaning the BlackBerry NOC, the Good NOC, as well as all the bits and pieces that connect all this stuff to make it all secure, will also be mapped and optimized. So you can look forward to these things happening as the year progresses. What does it look like for you as a developer? Because that's what this webcast is about. Well, at its core level here, you've got good secured applications today that are in market today. You've got, Good Work, Good Access, and so on. You now also have the BlackBerry-built application services such as Watchdogs, BBM, Ad Hoc, and so on, also embedded inside the Good secure containers. So that's the section in the middle there. All of these things will be supported in the platform management abilities that we've always traditionally managed, both at BlackBerry and at Good. So BYOD, bring your own device, COPE, corporately owned, personally enabled, COBO, corporately owned, business owned, and M2M. As these platforms are deployed into the infrastructure, we also will be doing the same thing in terms of giving access to third-party vendors. So the little green square that you see in the upper right-hand corner of this diagram, that's you folks on the phone. So whether you're an enterprise developer, a partner, a third-party vendor who's new to the infrastructure, and so on, you'll be able to build and deploy your mobile applications into our infrastructure so they can be managed and deployed onto the Good secured application realm in the same way that we're doing it today with the BlackBerry applications that are now enabled. We'll continue to support Ad Hoc, Watchdogs, and other services as we deploy them and build them out into our platform. As of, I can't remember when we said this, was it last week or the week before, Secure Workspace is being continued to be supported, but it is not being favored. What I mean by that is, as of this month going forward, Good is now the favored platform strategy for BlackBerry to support end-user devices, particularly on iOS, including iPad, iPhone, and so on, as well as on support for that will continue on Android and Windows Mobile. Let me get into that a bit more in the next slide. What do we recommend? There's a lot of choices around mobility right now, a lot of different competing platforms, strategies, vendors. With the merging of BES and Good Control Server, this consolidation that's happening in the industry is going to make things simpler. But despite all that, I figure it's still probably a good point to give a quick overview on what we recommend today. So the first thing we recommend is if you're an enterprise developer, if you're building an application inside your company to support a dozen, accountants, you're supporting 100 people on a sales team, and so on, we still recommend using HTML5. If you build your application using HTML5 and deploy it into the work browser on BlackBerry or the Good Access browser on Good, and so on, it's fully supported, it's mobile aware, and if you do a decent design job on the HTML5 side, it's a great application environment that's also multi-platform. We also suggest and recommend using PhoneGap or Cordova if you want to make a hybrid application where you compile your HTML5. That's the simplest way to start and enable this process. We continue to recommend that. However, if you're a mobile developer, if you're a partner, if you're building an application for for thousands, if not more, if you plan on deploying to Apple's store, to Good's store, and so on, here's what we recommend. For iOS, the Good SDK, by far the market leader in the marketplace. When BlackBerry was just BlackBerry and we had just Secure Workspace, Good was still the market leader in iOS. There's good reason for that, pun intended. It is by far the best and most secure environment for building and deploying applications on iPhone, on iPad, and so on. Recommended, and as a strategy going forward, take a look at it closely. Android. Android is interesting. There are two strategies that we recommend right now. If you're already a shop that's building and deploying for the Good SDK on iOS, I would suggest that following that strategy by using the Good SDK for Android. It would make things simpler. The business model in terms of access to back-end systems and how you compile your application would be very familiar to anyone doing the iOS work. However, if you're not, or if you're, for example, a BlackBerry Priv user, and BlackBerry Priv uses Android for Work. BlackBerry has partnered with Google to support Android for Work. It's fully supported by BES 12, and in terms of development resources internally, Good SDK and Android for Work have equal priority. Knox. Samsung Knox is not built and deployed or written by BlackBerry, but it is fully supported. If you're a shop that purchased Samsung devices that are running the Knox operating system, we fully support that in BES 12, and we also will continue to support that as a top-tier platform going forward. So on the Android platform, my suggestion is if you're already an Android for Work shop, use Android for Work. If you want to buy BlackBerry devices that are made with Android for Work, like the Priv, continue down the path of Android for Work. If you have other devices, or if you're already a Good SDK developer for iOS, Good SDK is an excellent choice. And finally, if you're already a Samsung shop, continue with Samsung and we will fully support you. BlackBerry 10? Well, that's us. We make BlackBerry 10 devices. Our IDE is Cascades, fully supported. Windows 10. Windows 10 has been supported by BES 12 for a little while now, as under MDM, meaning meaning email, calendar, PIM, that sort of thing. The Good SDK exists for Windows 10. It will be supported. Worth looking at. Windows is not the biggest market share right now in terms of phones, but it's certainly interesting how this story is going because Windows 10 here does not say Windows 10 phone. It says Windows 10. Strangely enough, that means we support managing Windows 10 devices, laptops, for example, notebooks, and certainly Surface tablets would have turned out to be quite a little success story for Microsoft lately. So as that evolves, we'll evolve with that platform story as well. I'd encourage you to go and have a look at the dev blog. I wrote a little article about Windows 10. We'll see how that goes. And finally, IoT, Internet of Things. We've been talking about this for quite a while. We haven't put out a lot of detail yet. I'm going to continue that opaque way of saying things and say stay tuned. Rich, I've been sort of monopolizing the conversation here. Any thoughts on what I said? Any criticism?
Yeah, just a couple points. So once you start developing with the Good SDK, then after you've done your first application on your first platform, the basic principles in architecture are common across all the different platforms. So going from an iOS version of your app to an Android version is really an implementation level work. So you've got the architecture down, and each additional platform is incremental rather than having to restructure the application significantly. And the second point is we are looking at how the Good SDK and Android for Work complement each other and might play together. So that's something down the road. Also, Good Dynamics applications for Android run within Knox unchanged. So there's a little bit of kind of bookmaking or bookkeeping that needs to be done to support that, but the application doesn't need to change. So the SDK is where we're going forward and can be used across the different platforms in a complementary way as Ed described. Okay.
Perfect. And in fact, let's segue right on that, right onto your deck, and let's do a little bit of a deeper dive here. Let me pass you the ball here, Rich. Over to you.
Okay. Let me just pull up my deck.
Let me say one thing. As we go on through this process, you're welcome to submit questions at any time. We have a couple of other colleagues who are being silent, and they'll be willing to type in answers. And at the end, we'll have a bit of a wrap-up on any of the highlights, and we'll try to talk to those over the phone. But feel free to please keep typing in questions.
Okay, thanks, Ed. So this is really part one of a continuing series as we dive deeper into Good Dynamics for our developers. And without further ado, I will start into it. So this is the Good Dynamics SDK architecture. And essentially there's two different ways that you can leverage this. One is with native applications. The other is with Web 2.0 technologies such as HTML5 or PhoneGap, and there's other platforms as well that sit on top of the SDK such as Xamarin. So you can use, as Ed mentioned, HTML5 and take advantage of the Good Dynamics SDK via the Good Access browser application. And also, if you're building an SDK app, you can use Cordova to build that application if that's a development environment that you choose. Underneath the build environment are the different sets of APIs that are provided by Good Dynamics. So these are security building blocks, if you will. There are management and policy APIs, and these are the things that interact with the IT admin on the Good Control console. So he can set different policies for things like a timeout on the app so that if you haven't touched your app for a certain amount of time, it'll close and you'll be forced to log back into it. So the Good Dynamics library does the enforcement of these policies without the programmer having to get involved. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the platform services that Good Dynamics provides as well without the programmer having to do any work at all. And then we also provide APIs for secure storage. So we're going to dive deeper into these as well, but these secure any kind of data that you want to store within your application. And the next set of APIs is our secure comms APIs, and these protect the data that flow through the tunnel that Ed showed in the architecture diagram. So you've got end-to-end encryption, and the data is secure as it travels through the air. And finally, we have a more advanced set of APIs, which we call shared services, and this gives applications the ability to share their functionality in a consumer-provider paradigm so that applications can interact with each other in a secure way. And finally, the final point is the regular native APIs are still available to you, except for the ones that Good Dynamics replaces with secure measures. So rather than putting a full layer between your application and the native OS, we just supply these building blocks for security, and then the rest of your application is unchanged. So to add Good Dynamics, you're only changing a small percentage of your application, well above, or well below 5%. So 95% or more of your application doesn't change to use Good Dynamics, and that's some of the good news. Sorry for the pun. Okay. So now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the APIs and what we call security services. So some of these built-in services around management are the connection to the NOC. When your application first starts, then you get a activation screen presented to you, and this is all built into the library, and your application does a handshake with the NOC. Also, there's built into the application is the entitlement check. That is, the IT admin has to entitle a user to each of the applications. He maps a user to device and applications that he's entitled to. That's built into the library as well as compliance. So compliance means the IT admin can specify what versions of the OS you're allowed to run an application on. So he may say below iOS 8, you're not allowed to run certain applications because they won't work on those lower levels of iOS, for example. Okay, jumping into the other API sets. For secure storage, we have a secure file system, a secure database, which is based on SQL 8.3, and core data for iOS. One of the things that should be noted is we try to create our APIs so that you have to change as little as possible. So for example, for the secure database, you only have to change your open call. The rest of the SQL 8.3 calls are the same. So utilizing a secure database in Good Dynamics is a one-line change, which is great for the developer. The secure file system is a mix. You do have to swap some of the APIs. Other ones are the same as the native ones that you use. So again, we're trying to make it as simple to use the API set as possible. Core data is primarily our own APIs, but they match the core data APIs within iOS. Okay, secure communication APIs. So we support HTTP and HTTPS. Actually, once you initialize the library, then all your calls to HTTP and HTTPS are routed through the library, and decisions are made whether to ship the data up to the cloud or through the firewall. And all the encryption and decryption is taken care of underneath the covers. You don't have to change your calls to HTTP or HTTPS at all. So this is another thing that makes it easy to use the APIs. We also have TCP sockets, which are used much more infrequently, and those do require using our signature APIs. And finally, you can use the URL loading schemes that come with the operating systems as well. So the fourth set of APIs are the shared service framework APIs. Underneath it all is a secure data exchange set of APIs that are very low level, but do the proprietary encrypting and decrypting as you move data between applications. Built on top of that are framework, which again allow applications to provide their functionality to other applications, and the library and the rest of the infrastructure of Good Dynamics takes care of discovering the other services that are available. And I'll give an example of that in a second. We also provide server-side services, or the ability to entitle to the user the use of server-side services. So it's not only does Good Dynamics manage the applications on the device, but also it can manage server-side services to those devices or to those applications. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a shared service example real quickly. So if your application is the blue application here and you want to do some wireless printing, you don't have that built into your application, then there are APIs in the shared services framework that essentially you can say, I want to print. And the shared services framework will actually do what we call discovery and determine whether there's a printer application, wireless printer application on your device. And if so, then your application will can call that print service of the other application. Control will flip to that to print application, and the wireless printing will happen, and then control will pass back to your app. So this is a way to pass the document that you're printing securely to the print app, and then pass the control back to your app. So these things can be used as kind of tinker toys, if you will, to create workflows between apps. And one of the big advantages here of the SDK and its approach is not only are we securing things within their applications, within your container, but we're securing between containers or applications and allowing workflows of different services provided by those applications to be created, so you can support things like different line of business use cases. So you may have like an insurance adjuster that needs to download a form, then edit it, and then maybe have it signed by the customer and then ship it off in email. And each of those different steps could be a different Good Dynamics application. So the applications, the shared services are designed to allow your applications to be combined together for a higher value. Okay, so that was just one example of the kind of mobility service that we provide called the print service. There is a whole host of other services that have been defined that your applications can provide the actual service for that service that's been defined. And the shared service framework also allows you to define your own services as well. But here's a few examples. So on the left column, we have services that are right on the device that are in between applications. So the transfer file service, very basic. It allows you to hand a file from your application securely to another application. Send email service is a way for you to send an email from your application through our GFE, Good for Enterprise, our legacy email app, or Good Work, which is our new Good Dynamics-based email app. So your app basically says, I want to send an email, and then a dialog comes up for the user to fill in all the fields of the email, the to, the CC, the subject, and fill in some body of the email. And also you can attach files as well. So that's great service that our customers have come to expect because often the customers will have Good Work or GFE already installed, and they want your applications to interact with them. Then there's another pair of services that are of note. This is the edit service and the save back service. All the services are unidirectional. They're not round-trip services. So if you want to hand a file off to an editing application that will edit maybe a Microsoft spreadsheet or any kind of Microsoft document, then you would invoke this edit service. And one of the applications that provides editing, like for example, Polaris is an application that does Microsoft document editing, would come to the forefront, and you could do the editing within that application. And then from that application, you would invoke the save back service, which would push the changed file back to your application. So that's a pair of services that are used between you and your application and another application to get files edited and saved back. Finally, there's the launch service that allows your application to show up in our launcher, which is depicted sort of an iconic form here. But within Good Work, there is an interface which we call the mobile desktop, or it's the name for it is the launcher. And from within that, in a very seamless way, you will have a set of apps listed, and you can just click on their icon and launch them from within Good Work. So it's a very convenient way to use your app as the launch pad for driving other capabilities that you want to use with other applications. And the launcher can actually be built into any application. So it can be built into your app. If you foresee that your app will be kind of the hub app and other apps will be the spokes, then the launcher is a good thing to put in your app so that someone can essentially live in your app and reach out to other apps for functionality. Okay, some of the server-side services, which I'll just touch on briefly, are a push service. So this is secure push. Secure payload is sent from server side to your application. So if you have an application server that needs to do push to your app, then you should use this because of its security. There's also a presence service, which tells you, who's present, which users are present. Also, there's a doc service, which is a service that has links to a variety of repositories of information like SharePoint, for example. And there's also a directory lookup service, which is a very basic service that allows you to find contacts within a global address list within a customer. So these are supported by our GEM server, the Good Enterprise Management Server, and that's a whole nother capability that we'll get into in further talks. Okay, lastly, I want to talk about some of the platform services which are built into Good Dynamics, and you can take advantage of these and don't have to do any programming at all. So this is where we do heavy lifting in terms of security and just stability of the infrastructure. So there's identity and access management. We've talked about that a little bit before, but this is the way that your applications get activated and their credentials are checked and the applications are allowed to start up. We also have single sign-on capabilities on the device between applications. We have a thing called authentication delegation, which will be covered in later topics. And just briefly, what that allows you to do is only enter your credentials into one Good Dynamics app and then designate that app as the authentication delegate. And so you'll just enter your credentials into that app, and then all the other apps, when you start them, will authenticate against the first app. So you don't have to log into each Good Dynamics app on your device. We also connect into Kerberos KCD on the server side, so you can take advantage of single sign-on for server-side resources as well. Now, built into the back-end servers that Ed had shown on the architecture slide, we have high availability and disaster recovery built in. You can have redundant servers. You can have various configurations that span geographies to make sure that your infrastructure is up as much as possible. And that's all built into the infrastructure, so that the application programmer doesn't have to worry about any of this. The IT admin will do some configuration on his side, on the customer side, but again, as a developer, you don't need to do anything to take advantage of this. Also, the secure tunnel that I mentioned and was shown on Ed's slide is also comes for free. When you use HTTP or HTTPS, then information is sent through that secure tunnel, encrypted and decrypted end to end. We do all of that work as an application writer. You don't have to do any of that work. And then finally, the controls for the admin, which are on his console on the Good Control server, are built in as well. So things like the timeout that I mentioned come for free. Also, this is a framework as well. So if your application has specific policies that you want to have set by the IT admin, you can have those policies put onto the Good Control admin console. So, for example, if you have some kind of file sharing application and you want the IT admin to specify who's allowed to touch which files, then that control can be built into our control framework and show up on the Good Control. So you don't have to have a separate console for that. It can be all integrated onto the Good Control console. And these things are, as Ed said, will be integrated into the BES as the Good Control and the BES come together. Okay, so that's it for my piece, and I'll hand things over to EK to actually look at how you build a Good Dynamics application.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay, so you've got control, EK.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Good Dynamics development session. And I'm EK, Enterprise Solutions Manager here at BlackBerry. I'm going to be talking about how to develop your first good secured app. So let's get started. Okay, so this presentation is simple to create simple secure app using Good Dynamics SDK. I'm going to talk through the steps that require to build the simple app. In-house custom application and third-party application can be integrated with Good Dynamics SDK, creating good secure container app, which will provide you with Good Dynamics SDK will provide you the APIs to identify and authenticate the end user, and enforces enterprise password and compliances policies, and next protects data at rest as well as data in transit. It also provides to exchange data securely with other GD applications. So how do we start developing? So first step for you to, sorry, I have a bit of a cough. So first step is to sign up for Good Developer Network. It's free. So once you sign up, you will be able to see all the resources that you need to build your app. So next, we'll be downloading and installing the Good SDK based on the platform of your choice and development environment. So Good Dynamics SDK supports iOS, Android, and Windows. And we also provide plugins for PhoneGap and HTML and bindings for Xamarin. And as I mentioned, supported development tools, standard Android Studio, Xcode, and Visual Studio, including Eclipse. So I'm going to just pick the iOS platform as an example. So once you download the Good Dynamics SDK for iOS and install, it will inject the GD framework package into Xcode, and once you run the Xcode and create new project, you will see the single view Good Dynamics template project. So you can use that project to start developing your app. So let's just get into a little bit of code snippet. So this one shows you, this code snippet show you a Good Dynamics framework class, demonstrates the identity and authorization and access process. So once you run the application, it will show Good Authentication UI on top of your regular launch screen. So how to run GD app? I'm going to say GD app from now on, it's easier. So how to run GD app? After you download just the iOS SDK or Android SDK or plugins that you want to develop, you can run the app via enterprise simulation mode. All GD integrated apps are required a valid activation key to be activated via GD platform. But GD Enterprise Simulation Mode lets you test your app without setting up the server part, which is Cloud Good Control or Good Control and Good Proxy for the on-premise deployment. So in the, for example, iOS platform in Xcode, you can search your app's info.plist file and add the following new role, set the key as GD library mode and a value to GD Enterprise Simulation. So once you set that simulation mode, you can start running the iOS simulator. So first screen, once you install the app, you will see, let's just wait for the screenshot to come up. here we go. Okay, so once you install the app, this is on iOS Simulator. So you will have a Good Dynamics icon. By the way, Good Dynamics icon, splash screens, and activation process package, it will be all included in the template. So you don't have to develop the Good Dynamics screen. So next one, you will launch the splash screen for the app. And it will ask you to enter, it will go through the activation process. So as I mentioned before, all GD integrated app required access key. So simulation mode will simulate that process. So you can just type any email address and any activation key letter A to Z or number. So this is the good application activation process. We'll go through a bunch of steps. It will contact the GD infrastructure behind and allow application to be on GD platform. After that, user will have to set their own password for the app, and then this is the app's launch page for loading the Good Dynamics Developer Network page. So for more information, you can register. First thing, you can register Good Developer Network. And for code sample within GDN network, you can download code samples. You can view documents and API references. And also for developer support, you can go to that link. And for more Good Dynamics integrated apps, you can check out Marketplace. It will list all the apps that's available within GD infrastructure and Good Dynamics platform. For the questions, I will hand it over to Ed. And thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. We've been trying to keep up. There's been quite a few questions that have piled in. If you've got any more, please keep typing them in. I do want to cover one more item. Please put me on the last slide, EK. Oh, it's not there. Sorry about that. Yeah, sure. I'm gonna pass this over to Lee. Lee, if you want to sort of cover a few things, I'm going to go back to answering questions on chat.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Rich. And thank you, EK. Really interesting stuff. I think that, again, this is part one of a few-part series that we have coming, introducing everybody to the world of Good Dynamics SDK for developers. Our next webcast scheduled for March the 1st at 11 a.m. Eastern Time is part two of this series, and this will be the Good Dynamics client, and I'll look at the basic security services APIs. So watch for that. That will be sent out via invite to all of our folks that are involved in our newsletter and are part of our current distribution list. And also, it will be available on our blog. So watch our developer blog, and an invite and a link to the webcast series will be available there. I just want to remind everybody that this webcast is being recorded, so you're going to be able to get access to that via our developer blog, and it's also going to be available on this link here. If you see that, explore our new developer resources webpage, and a lot of the jumping off points into the Good Dynamic developer network and getting access to the SDK is going to be available through the developer resources section on this page. So go there, check it out. This is as our integration efforts come together, and the Good Dynamics page and the Good Dynamics page and resources and the BlackBerry resources are all kind of found in this one place. So you can sign up for our newsletter there. You can check out this developer series there, and again, you can get links right in to find all the information and get access to the Good SDK through that web page as well. So I just want to encourage everybody, as Ed said, we've got lots of great questions coming in. We want to be able to support all of our developers through this effort and introduction of the Good Dynamics solution. So please get your questions answered there. If they're not answered by the end of the webcast, we have your email attached to your questions, so we'll be able to get back to you with some of maybe the more technical type of answers that you're looking for. So just like to take this opportunity at this time to thank everybody for joining us today, and we look forward to spending some more time with you in the future.